Very well, Councillor. We resume proceedings.
Thank you. Honorable Commissioners, I call Mr. Edward Singhateh.
Good afternoon. I swear by the Almighty Allah.
I swear by the Almighty Allah
That the evidence which I shall give to this commission.
That the evidence which I shall give to this commission.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
So help me Allah.
So help me Allah.
Thank you, sir. You can wait for me.
Could you kindly state your names, please?
My name is Edward Singhateh.
Where do you live, Mr. Singhateh?
I live in Abuja, Nigeria.
Could you state your address?
It's number 1 Abdujuf Street, Asokoro, Abuja, Nigeria.
Asokoro, can you spell that?
Asokoro.
What work do you do?
I'm currently the Vice President of the ECOWAS Commission.
How long have you held that position?
From March 2016 to date.
Would you like to take a seat, please? Thank you. Were you appointed or elected to this position?
Sorry, there's an echo in the hall. I cannot hear properly.
Yeah. Were you appointed or elected to this position?
I was nominated by the Gambia government and I was appointed by the chairman of the Council of Ministers of ECOWAS.
Does it have a term, this office that you hold?
Yes, it does.
What is the term?
The term is 2 years.
Right. Before you were nominated to, or before you were appointed to this office, you served in the public service?
Yes, I did.
And what was your last position in the public service?
My last position was on the bench. I was employed by the judiciary. I was a magistrate from March 2011 to March 2013.
Okay. Did you hold any other public offices?
Yes, I did. From 1994 to 2007, I was in the government of the Gambia.
It's from 22nd July?
That is right.
To 2011?
To 2007.
2007?
Yes.
Could you tell us the positions you held during this period?
From July 1994 to February 1995, I was Minister of Defense. From February 1995 to October of 1996, I was Vice Chairman of the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council and Minister of Defense. From October 1996, immediately after the presidential elections, I was Vice President designate until the government was formed in March of 1997. From March of 1997, I was made Minister for Presidential Affairs, Fisheries, Natural Resources, the Environment, and National Assembly Affairs until May of 1999, when the portfolios of fisheries, natural resources, and the environment were put under office of the President, and I was left with presidential affairs and National Assembly affairs. In July of 2000, I was reappointed or reassigned the portfolios of fisheries, natural resources, and the environment, and along with the presidential affairs and National Assembly affairs which I was holding. 1 week later, I was redeployed to Works, the Ministry of Works, Communications and Information at the time. I was in that position until March of 2001, when the ministry was split and I was designated the Minister of Works, Construction and Infrastructure. From
March
2001. I held that position until September 2003, when I was redeployed as Minister for Trade, Industry and Employment.
What month?
In March 2003. Then I was redeployed to Forestry and Environment in March of 2005, and I held that position until September 2011, when my services were terminated from government.
7 or 11?
7.
2007.
Yes, ma'am.
That was your last office before?
That was my last office
until you became a magistrate.
That is right.
Mr. Singhateh, you were summoned here to assist the Commission with regard to its investigation concerning loans that were, or specifically a loan for today, that were made by Taiwan to the Gambia in 1995. According to the evidence before this commission, a loan of $35 million was sought by the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council and obtained from Taiwan. Can you tell us about the acquisition of this loan and how the money was utilized?
Yes, I can.
Let me just also, just to let you know, what we have not been able to find, and nobody seems to have, is a record of how this money was spent. What has been also, the evidence that has been laid before the Commission also shows that this was a loan that was entered in our loan book and which had to be paid, and which has been paid by the Gambian people. So could you, as I said, we would like to understand how it was obtained and what happened to the money.
Yes, when we took over in 1994, there was a transition program, first of all, to draft a new constitution and to revise the electoral laws, but there was also an infrastructural program to go alongside. Now, the reason for the infrastructural component was, firstly, we found that children were carrying their chairs and tables to school, walking long distances. There were not enough primary schools, and there were about only 8 high schools in the country at the time. There were only 2 government hospitals, and there was a big infrastructural deficit. So we came up with the component to improve the infrastructure of this country before the end of the transition. Now, the problem was that we sought funding for these infrastructural projects from our traditional donors, and the money was not forthcoming. Now, in 1995, somebody whom I don't know, I don't recall the name, through Ibu Jallo, who was a former council member, had suggested that we seek funding from Taiwan, the Republic of China on Taiwan. And what we were initially told was that if we negotiate with the Republic of China on Taiwan and recognize them and have diplomatic relations with them, they would most probably give us a grant of 50 million United States dollars that would cover the entire infrastructure component of the transition programs. Now, having listened to this proposition, we were briefed by Captain Ibu Jallo. A fact-finding mission was sent to go and see how probable this proposition was. I believe Captain Ibu Jallo was part of the delegation, along with, I think, the Minister of Finance at the time, but I cannot exactly recall the entire composition of the delegation since it is about 22 years ago.
Who was the Minister of Finance at the time?
I believe it must have been Bala Gaba Jahumpa, to the best of my memory. However, when they got to Taiwan, we were informed that the Taiwanese government was only prepared to disperse 35 million United States dollars, and that it was not going to be a grant, it was going to be a loan. And one thing that we were told, if I can remember correctly, is that once diplomatic relations are established with Taiwan, there is a possibility that they could write off the loan. Now, we were faced at the time with this dilemma. We wanted a grant, but they were only prepared to offer a loan. And so we weighed the options, either to take the loan and build the infrastructure, as after all governments take loans, or to forego the opportunity, and then we would not have funds to complete the transition projects. So it was agreed that we take the loan. Now, I cannot recall whether they came back and then went again, but what I do recall is that 30 million United States dollars was dispersed directly to an account at the central bank. Now, when Captain Ibu Jallo returned, I was informed that 5 million United States dollars had come in cash. And so, I had asked, why did this money come in cash? Why wasn't it dispersed together with the $30 million to the account in the central bank? And the reason that I was given by the chairman at the time was that, well, it is important to have cash so that if there's any emergency, it can be quickly dealt with. But I can remember it was in the presence of the then Secretary General Mustafa Wada. And I had said, but no, this money is a loan that was contracted. It belongs to the Gambian people. It belongs in government coffers. And we cannot have cash to this extent just lying around. Can we not have it deposited? And the Secretary General agreed, strongly agreed, and so the chairman eventually said, yes, okay, it can be deposited, let's have it deposited. or did he say have it deposited? So what I did next, I called the governor of the central bank at the time, and I had told him to liaise with the Secretary General, Mustafa Wada, to ensure that the cash that is at State House is deposited in the account accordingly, or at the central bank. Now, I believe he did so because a few days later he did call. I cannot remember whether it was 2 or 3 days later, but he did call and thanked me and said the monies have been deposited. What I didn't do actually was verify exactly how much was deposited, but I was of the opinion that the $5 million that had come in cash that we had agreed should go into the central bank had been duly deposited. So,
if I may just stop you there and to bring part of the evidence that has already been led to your attention. The evidence we have is that after the receipt of the 30 million into the central bank accounts, cash was indeed deposited, but it was deposited by yourself together with Ibu Jallo in the sum of $2,220,000 United States dollars in cash. That's the evidence that's been led.
Well, if I had ever held $2 million in cash, I'm sure I would surely remember. I have never held that amount. In fact, I did not even see the cash itself. I was only told that there had been $5 million that was brought in cash. And that is why I was questioning, first of all, how could $5 million travel from Taiwan all the way to the Gambia? And number two, why is it sitting in cash? Why is it not deposited? But I did not take the money physically to the bank. The only thing that I did was ensure that I spoke with the governor to liaise with the Secretary General, who was in the meeting at the time when I insisted that all cash be deposited, and I asked him to make sure that he complies and ensures that the money is at the central bank.
The evidence from Mr. Kababajo is that Mr. Ibu Jallo came in a jet.
Sorry?
Surely he traveled in a jet. Surely you were there?
I don't believe I was in that meeting, but I also was asking how did the money come, and because to me it was not normal for somebody to travel with $5 million like that.
What we would like you to assist us on was the accounting of this money. Here was a council that was responsible for governing the country. It borrowed money. On the surface of it, there is nothing wrong with that, but for which then it became accountable. How was this money accounted for? Because the evidence, again, from the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Mr. Ali Ngom, was that the Ministry of Finance had nothing to do with this money.
Well, I would not know to what extent the staff at the Ministry of Finance were given the knowledge about the way the money was dispersed. But what I can assure you is that the Minister of Finance at the time attended all cabinet meetings where the transition projects were discussed and the disbursements were discussed. And so obviously it just goes to follow that he should ensure that his staff are aware. But coming to the disbursement, at the beginning...
Just before we we move on to that, to be fair, Mr. Ngom did say they were aware that he was aware that there were projects that were being financed. But when I talk about accountability, I'm talking about the money actually being entered in the government books and being monitored by the Ministry of Finance. That's what I mean when I say that was not accounted for. Maybe you might wish to reconsider your answer if you wish following that explanation on my part.
Well, what I do know is that the Minister for Finance was sent to go and negotiate this loan for a reason. The reason being is that by virtue of his portfolio, he should ensure that whatever loan is contracted is definitely entered into the books of finance, the government books at finance. Okay. And if they have not, if it was not, then obviously there is a problem at that level. But as far as I was concerned, there was no denial of the fact that there was a loan. The Ministry of Finance was definitely involved in the negotiation. And so the management of it itself should have also involved the Ministry of Finance.
Who were the signatories to this account?
Well, initially I was one of the signatories. I was made one of the signatories to the account. I believe along with Captain Ibujalo. I cannot recall exactly, but I think there were two of us. Now, shortly after, I reconsidered myself as a signatory to this account for the very reason of accountability. I felt that it was not in my place as the Vice Chairman of the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council and Minister of Defense to be signing checks that should have been signed by the Accountant General. I thought that once an instruction is given to implement an infrastructure project, the Minister of Finance will give instructions to the Accountant General, who will sign a check of the central bank in the name of whoever contractor it is, and then the contract would be duly implemented. So I respectfully requested my name to be withdrawn as a signatory, hoping, well, with the, not the hope, but with the belief that the monies would be dispersed in the correct manner.
What steps did you take then to make sure that this was done? Because again, the evidence we have is that Mr. Ibujalo remained a signatory to the account until he left the jurisdiction and was accused of theft. And thereafter, the signatory to the account appears to have been one Mr. Baba Job.
Well, I am not aware of Mr. Baba Job ever becoming a signatory to this account.
But you are aware that Mr. Ibujalo continued to be sole signatory to the account?
No, I was not aware that he was the sole signatory to the account.
You were the vice chairman of the council. This was a loan in this time to 2018, which is a great deal of money. In 1994, it probably might have been larger than our budget. I haven't checked the figures. Again, I go to the question, what a mechanism or procedure or process did the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council put in place for the money to be accounted for, given its mantra on accountability, transparency, which we lived with from day to day?
Yes, absolutely. Like I said, I had respectfully requested my signature to be withdrawn. And what we did believe, according to government procedure, is that the Ministry of Finance should have taken responsibility for the loan. Now, as far as I am concerned, that was the procedure. I was not aware of the fact that Mr. Ibujalo remained the sole signatory to the account, because as we were implementing the projects, our own procedure was that the chairman of the Committee on Transition Projects would conceive a project, it will be costed and brought to council and then to cabinet for endorsement, and once it has been endorsed and the chairman, who obviously was in contact with the governor of central bank as to the balance and the availability of funds, there is a go-ahead and a check is drawn. Now, I was always of the opinion that those checks were from finance. I didn't know that they were from anywhere else.
But Mr. Singhateh, we know that Mr. Ibu Jallow was then accused of stealing $3 million, which he moved from the central bank. That you do confirm this?
Yes, of course.
Which he could have only done if he remained signatory to the account.
Yes, of course. But at the time, I asked for my signature to be withdrawn and for due process to be followed. I obviously thought that due process was followed and Ministry of Finance had taken control of the account. Now, when Ibu Jallow had left the jurisdiction, in fact, I believe he left the jurisdiction and tendered his resignation. It was then that the governor of central bank ran to somebody at State House and said, but this man has resigned, he just transferred $3 million. He transferred the $3 million without our notice. Now, of course, it is obvious that there was a very serious lapse and at no one time should he have been allowed to be the sole signatory to the account. But what I do know is that the chairman was liaising with the governor directly on the balance of the funds and was reporting back to council and cabinet when a project is conceived and costed and permission is sought for its implementation.
Did you ever ask him to account to the council?
Please, can we pause on the signatories? Mr. Singhateh.
Yes, sir.
We want to understand how you and Mr. Jallow became the signatories. And also, while you were reconsidering yourself as a signatory, what process was followed or what you did to make it formal? Were you nominated to be signatories or were you self-appointed, you and former captain or retired captain? And when you were reconsidering, it was a unilateral move on your part or it was in consultation with the ruling council at the time? Just take us through so we understand how the gap came about.
Yes, we were nominated or designated to be signatories. Now, after I was designated to be a signatory to the account, I felt that it was wrong. It was not correct for me to be a signatory to this account. And I informed them that no, I would prefer not to be a signatory to this account and that the money should be dispersed according to government procedure. That would be the proper thing. But they did agree. I cannot remember who and who was there, but it was generally agreed. I was withdrawn as a signatory, and I believed that that would have been the path that was followed, and Ministry of Finance should have taken over the responsibility of managing the disbursement of that loan.
So in the formal notification of your withdrawal as a signatory, was there a replacement signatory?
No, like I said, I had stated that it was not right. If it was not right for me as vice chairman of the council, it is not right for any council member to be a signatory. So I felt that we should follow the laid down government procedure of managing government funds. And as such, I had that belief that Ministry of Finance was actually dispersing the funds upon the instruction of the cabinet.
I'm still not clear.
Yes.
The letter that formally notified the central bank that you are no longer a signatory, did it come from you or did it come from the ruling council?
Well, I had notified council verbally, and so I am quite sure it must have come from the secretary to council.
Okay. So that's where the gap was. The letter that came from the Secretary to Council was silent about your replacement.
Yes, well, it could have been, but I did not see that. So I cannot intelligently comment on the content of that letter.
Okay. So it might be of interest to us to find that letter, the formal notification of withdrawal of Mr. Singhateh as a signatory.
Thank you, Honorable Commissioner. No record can be found, at least has been found so far. Mr. Singhateh, was there ever a decision at the level of the Council that the Ministry of Finance would take charge of the funds that were paid into Central Bank?
I cannot recall whether there was a specific instruction.
Now, what I do not understand, if you at a meeting did say it was not appropriate for the Vice Chair to be signatory to the account, why wasn't it decided at that meeting who would then be signatory to the account?
Well, one reason that I can think of, and that is that it is under the obligation, the duty of the Ministry of Finance to take control of these funds. And so they should have automatically done so. But like I said, I cannot recall whether there was any specific instruction to the Minister of Finance to take over the control of the funds. But what I do recall is that everyone agreeing that I should not be a signatory, and that my concerns of council members also being signatories to the account was also agreed.
Again, the evidence we have here, Mr. Singhateh, contrary to what you're saying, is that the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council requested that these funds not be commingled with government funds, that you wished to disburse these funds separately to fund what you regarded as AFPRC projects. Do you recollect that?
What I can recall is that instructions were given to keep the funds in a specific account. But there is no doubt, or there was no doubt in anyone's mind, that these funds were government funds.
All right. Can we move on to the alleged theft by Mr. Ibu Jallow? Mr. Ibu Jallow was accused of stealing $3 million. Tell us what happened after he stole the $3 million.
What I can recall is that Ibu Jallow left the jurisdiction and resigned from the council. Immediately after, we were informed by the central bank that $3 million United States dollars had been transferred to Switzerland. I don't know exactly to which bank.
According to the complaint lodged, it was to the Credit Lioness.
Okay, I cannot...
That was the complaint lodged by the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council.
I cannot recall. It's over 22 years ago. But anyway, once we realized that the funds had actually gone, the governor of Central Bank was instructed to try to recover. I believe what he did was contact the bank directly to inform them that the funds had been transferred fraudulently. Then I can recall there was a delegation sent, led by the Attorney General at the time, some staff from Finance and Central Bank, to Switzerland to try to recover the funds. What I do know is that there were funds recovered. Excuse me. I cannot recall the exact sum, but I do know that funds were recovered and dispersed back to the central bank to the best of my knowledge.
When this account, or tell us about the opening of the account in the Swiss bank. Because an account was opened in the Swiss bank, and that's how Ibu Jallow was able to transfer funds out. Tell us about this account that was opened in the Swiss bank.
Well, I am not aware of any Swiss bank account. It never came to council. It was not discussed. And if there was a Swiss bank account opened, then definitely the money was not for that purpose. What I do recall is that we had agreed that the monies be transferred to the central bank, not any Swiss bank account.
Mr. Singhateh, at the time this story about Ibu Jallow broke, there were stories in the media that a Swiss banker had flown to the Gambia on the request of the ex-president for him to open a private bank account for the ex-president. It was in the media. What did the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council, of which you were the vice chairman, do about this story, if it wasn't true?
Well, as far as we were concerned, it was only a story. I did not see any Swiss banker. I did not meet anyone from Switzerland concerning any bank transaction. As far as I was concerned, the funds that we had secured from Taiwan were safely in the account at Central Bank.
They could not have been so safe since 3 million had, on your own showing, already left. Did you confront the ex-president about the allegation that he had opened a Swiss bank account into which he was paying money?
No, nobody had confronted the ex-president on the allegation.
Why?
Well, I believe that it would be wrong for you to hear or to read an allegation in a newspaper and then go and confront the president as if he had done something wrong.
But there was money transferred to Switzerland, and this was $3 million, and you had sent a delegation to Switzerland. Obviously, there was a bank account in Switzerland. So what was wrong in asking the president about the existence of these bank accounts?
Well, from what I know, it was Ibu Jallow that transferred the money, and he was trying to benefit from that money. I don't think it had anything to do with the president at the time.
Mr. Singhateh, just going back a little on the evidence that you have led so far, you recognized Taiwan on the expectation that you would receive 50 million as a grant. What you got was a loan, which because of the shortness of the term, looked a little commercial in any event. So what actually was the incentive then for recognizing Taiwan?
Well, the incentive was not only contracting the loan, but subsequent assistance from Taiwan that came to the Republic of the Gambia. And I can just tell you of a few benefits. The Free Education for Girls program was sponsored by the Republic of China on Taiwan. They funded the Cuban Doctors program. They funded several agricultural projects. What I do know subsequently is after a discussion with the Taiwanese ambassador, this was, I think, in early 2000s, he was complaining that the Gambian people don't know the extent of their assistance. And I told him that, well, why don't you bring the press and at least let the Gambian people know, because it is assistance that you are given. He says, well, we go to State House directly, and it is the president that deals with the assistance package from Taiwan.
All these projects that you are mentioning, according to the records, were a number of years after 1995. In 1995, did the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council receive an additional incentive in cash from Taiwan?
No, we did not.
Why was there a complaint lodged on the 16th January 1996 that Ibu Jallow had stolen an additional sum of $20 million.
Sorry, I cannot hear.
Why was a complaint lodged in the Swiss courts that Ibu Jallow had stolen more than $3 million? He was alleged to have stolen $20 million.
The only complaint that I am aware of is the one to recover the $3 million that was transferred from the central bank. That is the only one that I know of.
Did the President ever submit accounts to the Armed Forces Provisional Ruling Council?
There were no physical accounts submitted. There was no bank statement given. The only way he accounted was because he was in direct touch with the governor, was when a project is conceived and costed and brought, he would tell us whether the funds are there or not, and that we could afford it or not.
Neither the members of the APRC Council or Cabinet asked for an account to be filed?
Well, once we were confident that the programs were being funded and that the money was there, and the chairman was telling us, yes, we can afford this, there is X amount left, we can afford this program. Of course, I mean, why would we expect bank statements?
Because you are accountable to the Gambian people.
Yes,
or did you not think you are accountable to the Gambian people?
Of course we are, but that is why we have the Auditor General, and ordinarily the central bank and all government accounts should be audited. We don't audit ourselves. The government would, well, the government agency responsible for that should be able to ensure that there is proper accountability.
Since this was in a special account, was any process or mechanism put in place to enable the government offices that you have mentioned audit these accounts? Because all the evidence we have here is that these accounts were operated outside of the government system, and no government office has any trace or record of these monies.
As far as I know, the monies were deposited in the central bank for a purpose because they are government money. And no account, as far as I am concerned, was off limits. When the central bank is being audited, all accounts, including the one containing the money from Taiwan, should be audited.
Just a couple of questions on this. The law is clear, the rules are clear. The Auditor General is supposed to do an annual audit of government departments. And you had an accounting process, a budget process, and so on. When you did not receive any audit with regard to this account, was any action taken by any of you?
I believe at the time there was a backlog of accounts that needed to be audited. I think there was a backlog of government accounts. Now, what we did do, well, through the Ministry of Finance, remember there was a minister responsible, is ensure that the backlog of years to be audited were duly audited. This is what we had ensured. I cannot remember when the backlog was cleared, but as far as I'm concerned, all government departments, ministries, including the central bank, should have been audited duly by the Auditor General.
I see. All right. So you considered the president, ex-president, entirely responsible for these monies, and he was not subject to your supervision. Is that what we are to understand? Since you didn't think it appropriate to ask that he account for the monies?
Well, the monies were not physically with him. And the monies were lodged with the central bank And the governor of central bank is also answerable to the Minister of Finance. So I would have assumed that there was no secrecy about that account, that those who are supposed to know should know. And I don't know why there is this perception that this money was kept in secret. It was not.
Just to correct you, the governor of the central bank is not answerable to the Minister of Finance about how government spends its monies. Just to correct that. Neither was he accountable for how monies in any account kept in the central bank was spent. The government, which APRC, which was constituted by APRC, actually responsible for accounting for monies of government. Now, did you think that the APRC was accountable? That is the question that I ask you.
Well, obviously, government is accountable in general.
Did you think APRC was accountable?
The AFPRC,
was accountable, yes.
At the time was definitely accountable.
All right. I have no further questions for Mr. Singhateh.
Thank you, Counsel. Mr. Singhateh, let's carry on where Counsel left off. Please take us through the rules of engagement in the Council at the time with respect to the civilian members who were co-opted. You mentioned the Minister of Finance rising up to the plate and taking care of what he should have taken care of in terms of accountability. Now, did they have a voice as leaders there, the two civilian members, or were they supposed to respect their position that they were simply invited? Tell us how you interacted with them.
Yes, every member of council had a